Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the NESN Pregame Chat. My name is Zack Cox, joined as always by my fellow Patriots beat writer Randall and former Patriots linebacker Matt Chatham. The Patriots will be hosting the 5-4 Cleveland Browns here at Gillette Stadium today. Both of these teams enter the game at 5-4. They are two of 9 AFC East teams that currently sit at exactly 5 wins on the season. Just shows you how tight this AFC playoff race has been so far and likely will continue to be in the coming weeks. Some notable injuries for both sides in this game. Notable injuries at running back. Both of these teams will be without their top running back, Damian Harris, out for the Patriots with a concussion. Nick Chubb out for the Browns. Remains on the COVID-19 list. Browns also will be without their number 2 running back, Kareem Hunt, so Dearness Johnson is expected to start at running back for Cleveland in this game. Patriots did get some potential good news in that regard, as Ramondre Stevenson, who's been out all week with a concussion, reportedly is expected to play in this game, according to a report this morning from Adam Schefter. So definitely a little bit more of a cushion there for the Patriots than Cleveland will have in this game, but that will be certainly something that'll be worth watching on both sides in this one. We'll start offensively. Matt, offensively for the Patriots, what are you going to be looking for here today?
It really kind of has to be the story, and you teed it well, Zach. I think the notion that you don't have Harris on a team that has had great success running the football, really getting themselves back into the race. So where does that turn them? And, I think the temptation to say this is Brandon Bolden Day is there because he's been really nice as a compliment. But I do wonder if it's, full bore, like substitute A for B kind of situation. You mentioned that Stevenson's up. I'm curious, and as we tape this now, we don't yet know game day inactives, but I think that'll actually be big because I presume that J.J. Taylor comes up as well. Yeah. And if that's the case, when a guy's come off a concussion, he can clear protocol, but that doesn't mean you've seen him do full speed contact yet. So you'd hate to bring a guy up because he passes all the tests, get out here, first big collision in the hole, and then you've lost him again, right? So I presume it's going to be all 3. Yeah. The other alternative that a lot of people have brought up this week, and this came from sort of the reporter class, I didn't think of this idea, but it's a great idea. Roll back to Cordarrelle Patterson days, those times where backs had been banged up here and Bill was willing to go deeper into his roster to say, hey, here's a ball carrier I have that does something else, but he could get back and take 6 to 8 to something like that traditional carries. That's, I think, where they could go with Jonnu Smith. So if you're trying to divvy up carries and figure where the running game's coming from, presume that Brandon Bolden's going to have a bigger than normal role. It won't just be third down back stuff necessarily. He may actually be in there with a fullback, which we rarely, if ever, see. Matt LaCosse is active. Well, presumably he's up on the active roster as an additional tight end, which makes you think they're going to run the football because that's really one of Matt's best attributes. But I really think that, when we were talking about doing this show earlier in the week, I was like, it's Brandon Bolden Day, Brandon Bolden. I'm going to spend up here and do my entire time on Brandon Bolden. The more I think about it, I really think it's going to be a collective thing. You may see some more Jonnu carries. You may even see him actually in the backfield with another back next to him, which would be fun to see, back like the Cordarrelle stuff. But I also tend to think that it's going to be sort of a by committee kind of approach. But it's very important. You do not want to get yourself into a Mac Jones, go throw it 45 kind of day. I think that prerogative for the Patriots quarterback is much the same as it is for Mayfield on the other side.
Yeah, definitely. We've also seen the Patriots using 2 running backs at the same time a lot lately. Not a running back and a fullback, but actually 2 running backs. We saw a lot of Bolden and Stevenson on the field together last week, so maybe we'll see some more of that today. Maybe we'll see, as you mentioned, some Jonnu Smith worked into that mix as well. The Matt LaCosse elevation is interesting because maybe that means that Jonnu Smith is going to spend some time at running back. Right. Maybe it means he's not going to play in this game because he has been limited with a shoulder injury, currently listed as questionable, so we'll have to see about all that once the inactives come out. Dakota, offensively, what are you looking for here?
Yeah, we talk about him every week, so it might be kind of obvious, but I'm really looking at Mac Jones. I think we all can agree he wasn't at his best the last couple of weeks. And Matt, you might be able to speak to the concept of the rookie wall better than I can as someone who played in the game, but I think at the end of this game, Mac Jones will have played 10 regular season games. You combine that with 3 preseason games. That's as many as he played all of last year at Alabama. And at Alabama, he had 3 breaks baked into that schedule, 1 of 3 weeks, 2 of almost 2 weeks, and a lot of those games were blowouts. So if you factor that into, and then obviously the difference between college and the NFL, both in terms of physicality and just the mental grind of it, I think it's fair to wonder, maybe he's not hitting the rookie wall, so to speak, but maybe getting worn down a little bit, maybe tired. And so I just want to see if he looks a little bit better in this game, because if he doesn't, I think those questions become a little bit more valid. But maybe him and just the rest of the players need to get to that sort of mini bye after the Falcons game and then the real bye after the Bills game. But yeah, I'm just looking to see how Mac Jones looks in this game after a couple of down performances.
Yeah, certainly has not been Mac Jones' best stretch of the season by any means. I think he missed a lot of throws in that Chargers game a couple of weeks ago. Obviously had the interception, had the strip sack last week. So yeah, you're going to look to see if you can sort of right that trajectory up in the correct direction.
Real quick, I don't think he was necessarily bad last week. I just don't think he was really asked to do a whole lot. So to be fair to him, but I do think he looked a little off too.
And in a game like this where you do not have your number one running back, you're probably going to need your quarterback to deliver a few more plays by himself. What I'm going to be looking for is kind of along the Mac Jones line. Patriots are going to have to find a way to keep him protected against this Browns team that has one of the best pass rushes in the NFL. Myles Garrett leads the NFL in sacks. Jadeveon Clowney having a very strong year. Both of those guys either missed practice or were limited this week with some injury situations. Both of them are off the injury report and they will play in this game. So keeping those guys away from Mac Jones is going to be obviously a huge point of emphasis for the Patriots in this game, and I'm going to be really watching that Isaiah Wynn versus Myles Garrett matchup, because Garrett typically lines up on the defensive right side. That's the offensive left side, so that's Isaiah Wynn. Yeah. Isaiah Wynn obviously has gotten a lot of criticism this season, I think deservedly so. At least early in the year, he really struggled. He's actually been very good in these last couple of games. I know he was at least partially responsible for that Mac Jones strip sack last week, but if you look at his overall numbers, he's really improved since he came back from the COVID list and since the Patriots settled on the current O-line formula that they currently have, which brings me to my next point. Trent Brown, off injured reserve, is available for the Patriots in this game. We don't know how he will be used, though. We don't know if he's just going to slot back into that starting right tackle spot that he had to start the season, move Micah Onwenu back to left guard, and just kind of go with that original starting five. Would the Patriots move him over to left tackle, move Isaiah Wynn out of that spot, or would they just keep him on the bench maybe for an extra week or two, use him as that swing tackle while he continues to work his way back into the into full game shape, game speed, you could say, because this was his first week back at practice after a prolonged stint on injured reserve. So potential to have some moving parts on this offensive line, which again has played much better of late.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head of really what I think the story of the day is, because this has been such a part of their story the last month. That getting that collection together with Ted Karras playing guard, I think, is really what has changed things for them. And it's a tough call, and it's one that, as media members, we can't answer, and fans, we can't quite know because we don't get to see practice. But the level of readiness that Trent Brown has was answered over here on the practice field. So they know, we don't know. But if it was just a matter of he'd only put on pads and stepped on the field Wednesday, Thursday and Friday, to go against that particular set of edge guys, that would be a little bit scary. One thing I would mention also on the notion of the Garrett versus Wynn thing, watching some tape of Garrett this week, and obviously he's one of the best players in the NFL, and all left tackles have issues with this guy. The one thing that I think they need to commit to is and Ramondre Stevenson may be the guy, and this, you hope his head's okay enough to do this, to be a committed chipper, and this is something that James White did a great job at, but one of his big sacks against Burrow last week was one of those plays where you'll see the back feign the chip, sort of give it but not give it, right? And it's super important to a tackle, any blocker, that if you're getting help, that you get the help. If it's partial help that doesn't really come, Garrett blows right by it. The tackle kind of looked like, well, I thought I was getting some. Burrow gets blown up, and really that ended up being the difference in the game. I think that's a big thing that the Patriots, none of us touched it on the front end, but the Browns are coming off their most impressive win of the year, and it came off 3 turnovers. I mean, that game was all about the 3 turnovers. So I think protecting the ball, making sure if Wynn needs help, there's no shame in that. Most guys need it from time to time. Won't be down and down out, but you got to be careful with those 2 guys because they are definitely game wreckers. Denzel Ward, as we saw, can be a game wrecker. Troy Hill, as an inside blitzer, can be a game wrecker. That's really what Cleveland's been about. They've had some terrible defensive games, but they've really been playing well for the last month.
I do think it's worth mentioning, too, that Myles Garrett missed a couple practices this week. I forget, was it an ankle? ankle?
It was an ankle, yeah.
So maybe he's a little limited, but we'll see. But he's going to be out there, so you have to account for him.
Yeah, the Patriots certainly used a lot of those chip techniques against Joey Bosa a couple of weeks back. I would not be at all surprised if we see more of that here today. Switching over to the defensive side of the ball for the Patriots, as you mentioned, Browns coming off probably their biggest win of the season. They put up more than 40 points on the Cincinnati Bengals last week, a Bengals team that had been playing very well, had been in that playoff mix, continues to be in the playoff mix, but was definitely a very emphatic performance by that Cleveland Browns team. Defensively for the Patriots, what are you looking for today?
Pretty basic, and I'll be quick with this. You have to run stop against Cleveland. If they get massive run production, you're in trouble. We know that Chubb's not playing, but I think it bears mentioning that I think, in my personal view, I really look forward to this game, and it kind of sucks a little bit even from just like an analyst standpoint, not getting to watch him. Because,
you're not seeing the best on best.
Yeah, I think he is one of the best players in the NFL. This guy is so good because he brings a strength and power element, but they also has on the back end of this thing the explosiveness, and he has the home run hitting ability. D'Ernest Johnson is a really good back. In the Denver game, we got to see him get a load of carries, end up with like 160 net, 140-ish on the ground, whatever it was. But he is a really tough back who can get a little extra. But you saw him with a day's work of 6-yard carries, which is great per carry. But it wasn't like he had a 70 and then a bunch of threes. He was a legit get 5, get 6, get 7. It was very impressive what he did, but that's different than Chubb. Chubb was stop the huge play. Remember the Cleveland game here from a couple years ago in 19 where he just, you stop him, and he busts one, and it just ends up being a spoiled day based on that. Davon Godchaux talked about this a little bit this week. They had been focusing on Chubb, presuming Chubb would play. When you get that information that he's not, I don't think with this particular team, the defensive line meeting room changes much. It's still going to be a pack the box. It's still going to be in that Denver game that I referenced. Now, granted, Case Keenum was a starter as well at quarterback. Mayfield was out with his non-throwing shoulder. But they would often play 3 tight ends, straight blocking surfaces, even with their backup running back. So they're a committed running group. You have to stop them doing that. If you don't, that's really going to be the story of the game.
Yeah, Bill Belichick talked this week about how the Browns are really one of the only teams that really utilizes that 3 tight end package that you mentioned. They really love to bully people up front. This isn't a team that, like the Patriots, I don't think they want Baker Mayfield going out there and throwing the ball 50 times in this game. So, Dakota, defensively, what are you looking for?
Yeah, similar to what Matt was talking about, and I think this is a real statement game opportunity for this Patriots defensive line. They played really well against the Chargers with Austin Eckler, well against the Panthers with Christian McCaffrey. And yeah, both of those guys were banged up, but the Patriots played well. I do think this is a bigger test for them because, yeah, Nick Chubb is out, but teams that run the ball well typically run the ball well, regardless of who is out there. And I do think D'Ernest Johnson has looked really good when he's been out there. So I do think it's a big test for the Patriots, sort of an opportunity for them to kind of once and for all put to bed those early season concerns about the run defense because they've been playing so much better. But I just think it's really big for them where the last couple of games they've done a really good job of making the opposing offenses one-dimensional. And I think if they can do that in this game and put the game on Baker Mayfield's shoulders, I think that plays right into what the Patriots want to do. Their pass defense has been playing really well, and I think that's sort of the key for them is to make this game all about Baker Mayfield. And if they can do that, I like their chances.
Real quick point on the run-stop stuff that I meant to touch on, and you hit it. In some of those earlier games where there were run issues, you kind of get a cue from box count. If you're at home watching this on TV or you happen to be here in the stands watching today, check out what the Patriots' choice is. If the Patriots are legitimately going to put 8 people in the box and try to play a down safety, that's a commitment by them. Yeah. There have been times where they tried to do run stop and nickel, and that's saying we actually care more about not giving up the big play. But Peoples-Jones had a really big one last week, wide receiver, against the Bengals, a one-shot play, but they really haven't typically been a shot offense. I think we'll all learn a lot, not just if the Patriots can stop the run, because that's sort of a generic idea. It's if they commit to do it and are able to do it, or if they're able to do it with even lighter box, then they kick people's ass. But that's tough to do, especially with as good as this offensive line is.
Yeah, that goes right to my point. I'm going to be a little bit repetitive on this, but I do think stopping the run is obviously the most important factor for the Patriots in this game. And the fact that D'Ernest Johnson, the third-string running back for Cleveland, was able to have as productive as a game as he did in that Denver game, I think just speaks to how talented this Cleveland offensive line is. This is going to be one of the bigger tests of this season for the Patriots defense, and this is a Patriots defense that really has been playing well lately. Over these last couple of weeks, I think the Patriots have really morphed into the kind of team that a lot of people expected them to be, and that they really wanted to be from a defensive standpoint. I mean, you take out that one 75-yard run off a broken play that they allowed against the Chargers. They're allowing fewer than 4 yards per carry over the last couple of games, even despite the fact that they have faced a couple of very talented opposing running backs. And one final point.
You scared me too.
The announcer here scaring us a little bit. But one final point, the Browns are also a very good play-action pass team. I think that speaks to, is certainly a result of the fact that they can run the ball so well. And when you're not getting that gain on the ground, it's a lot harder to have that success through play action. So we will close out here with our choice segment, our betting segment. The line currently is Patriots -2. Patriots are 2-point home favorites in this game, and the over-under is 45. Matt, where are you leaning here?
I appreciate it creeping towards us because I believe it was at 2.5, maybe even a little north of that, depending on the house we were looking at. But I will take the Patriots to cover this week. I think if we really sort of step back and get out of the blowout win that they had against the Bengals a week ago. That's a division game. Sometimes that goes sideways. I think a little bit about the Jets. Like when the Patriots put up 50, we didn't expect them to do 50 the next week. What the Browns have been over the last month, the 3 other previous weeks, is pretty modest offense, winning offense. Like the Johnson getting the 160 on the ground and all that stuff. But they're still putting up like 17 points and 10 points and 15 points. And they've been that's their horse right now, that game style. And I think the Patriots have been pretty solid on both sides. Still some mistakes, but they're more of an ascending team where the Browns had been kind of and then they had a great week, and then now you see them. So I tend to think the Patriots are really on more of an uptick and are in better sort of position to win today. One prop, though, that I would also direct people's attention to, if you can get this in before kickoff, in games like this where you expect both teams to be run heavy and play action heavy, the tight ends often become a little more involved. And this could be a heavy tight end game. Could be for the Browns as well. But I saw Hunter Henry at a 29.5 yards total, which wouldn't have paid you last week. But I think this is the kind of week where, he's been on like two targets or catches a week roll for a while. He gets his touchdown, but I think this could easily become a volume day, especially down in the red zone. Get 4 or 5 catches, easily get over the 29 number.
Dakota, where are you going with here?
I agree with everything Matt just said, but for me, I'm looking at another player prop, Mac Jones, 243.5 passing yards. I know you said earlier that you didn't want to have this be a game where it's all on the rookie quarterback.
Over it. Are you going over it?
I'm going over. Yeah, I'm going over.
That's a good call.
I know you said you don't want this to be all on the rookie quarterback, but I do think the Patriots are going to struggle to generate much on their run. The Browns have a good run defense, and so I just think on volume alone, I think Mac Jones has a good chance of going over that. You don't even necessarily have to play all that well to go over that number. So I think he gets there today.
I'm going to go with Matt. I like the Patriots to win and cover. I just think the Patriots defensively, they've been playing very well lately. If there was a Chubb or even a Kareem Hunt in this game, maybe I would be leaning a little bit differently, but I think the Patriots are going to be able to successfully limit this Browns offense enough to get a win in this game, because this Browns offense has been a little schizophrenic this season. We've seen multiple games where they've gone over 40 and then multiple games where they've been below 20. They haven't really had much consistency there. I think the Patriots can win and cover at home, and if they do, it would certainly be highly beneficial to their playoff hopes, because I saw some stats from 538 this week. If they win this game, Patriots playoff odds go up to 68% at where they would be 6-4 at that point, and obviously have an important tiebreaker and a potential wild card fight with this Browns team. So that will do it for this week's NESN Pregame Chat. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Zack Cox NESN. You can follow Dakota at Dak Randall NESN. You can follow Matt at CHATHAM58, and you can follow along with all of our Patriots coverage pre, in, and post game on NESN.com.
Next time I want to wear gloves.